Hey everybody, this is Jason Jeffries here. I'm starting a new project called the Alliance Project, also known as the Rebellion, for obvious reasons. Symbol behind me here. Uh, just going to go ahead and do my first video. I figured I'd break down the history. This is Baby Girl here in the background. It's my dog. We got another dog. But yeah, I was going to go ahead and try to make a new video for you, give you a little bit of a breakdown of Nibiru, Thoth, the Atlanteans, this whole idea, the whole subject that I've been talking about, making videos about, doing interviews with Gerald, Clark, the Rex Barrett, the Leak Project, John Moore on his radio show, Dave Dobbs out in the Pyrenees, a few other people, trying to pull together some resources and get everybody from different walks of life that has anything to do with this and any different part that they can kind of come together and see if I can break it down to layman's terms for people. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to do this. Just bear with me while I get some of my notes pulled up real quick, and I'll try to make this nice and fluent for you and just an enjoyable show. So thanks for watching my first show. So to start this off, a lot of people ask and have questions about Thoth, Enki, Enlil, Nibiru, this whole deal, the Sumerians. So I just figured I'd give a breakdown because over the past couple thousand years, our history's been manipulated, warped, twisted, and basically just everything. There's lies and truth out there everywhere. So when you're discerning information, you got to learn to read between the lines. And yeah, history isn't what we think it is and what we've been taught, obviously. So I'll kind of go down a breakdown of my study, my research, and kind of show you where I believe or where I'm at so far with all this. And yeah, so basically we'll start at point A, which is, for example, we'll just talk about the pyramids in Egypt. It's a good starting point. Modern history can't account for it. You can't mine these blocks and tug them, carry them as far as they did. You can't do it with even 50 people just tugging on it. There's, let alone cut it, stack it, place it mathematically, precision of like a Fibonacci spiral and everything. The whole process of engineering and everything's way beyond anything that humanity could do. And that's just one of the points of evidence. When you just consider the alignments alone, it's crazy, the whole golden mean and Fibonacci spiral with the whole idea that it's on, and those sacred spots are all on, nodal points and cross sections of the ley lines of the earth and the natural grid of the energy lines of the earth. None of it can really be explained by modern science or even modern techniques. And that's just but one piece of the puzzle. You can go back further and further, and we do, and we will here in a minute. So when you consider history from, we'll say, the Bible, like Babylon, Akkad, Erech, we thought these cities were basically fantasy or make-believe. We just thought they were stories. Then we realized when archaeologists found these things that we found one, we found another, and we started really looking and reading between the lines again. And these archaeologists were really surprised that in front of them the whole time they had hints and clues to humanity's first and where to look, where to start digging, where society's risen from, and this and that. So it really led to a huge finding out there in Iraq, where they pulled thousands of these clay tablets out, where they were rolled with a cuneiform text on there, had many pictures, and had a history that stretched back over about 100,000 years, from king's lists to deeds, property, everything. They had taxes, everything was notarized. Even selling, receipts of everything. Everything was written, even laws, of course, and things like that. There was no petty laws, this and that. But it brought our human history way, way, way further back. It was what we call a stepstone civilization. These civilizations don't gradually incline, they just appear with all these technologies, and then all of a sudden later on they have more technology, more technology, more technology. And that really opened the door to all the study that we're doing here in this, for me to even be talking to you about any of this, that discovery in that cave. Now, when we see that they're talking about all these firsts and this is the oldest text and all these stories, we want to believe that they're just making it up, that they're not telling the truth. There's no way they could be telling the truth. But when you realize the trouble of making a unified language, going through the trouble of having created a language for whatever reason you want to create a language for, you create a language to keep and preserve your records. You do it to preserve knowledge and to carry on all that you've learned so it's not lost. You don't do it to tell fiction. You don't do it to just tell lies. You don't go through all that trouble of teaching and unifying a language. So when we really sit back and take it into a historical text, it opens up a whole new window for humanity and the windows of history. What you got to do to discern if they're telling the truth or not is realize the descriptions of science and things that we didn't know then that they knew back then. The things that we don't know now or you're just learning now that they knew back then, such as the descriptions of the planets from here and in space, size, the order, the Dogons knowing the rotation down to exact moment of how their star that we didn't even find till about 20, 30 years ago rotated. How'd they know that 500 years ago? So when you look at the real mysteries of how they knew knowledge ahead of time, that's when you can discern the truth from fiction. Another thing to consider is they knew the precession of the equinox, because that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, because for one to realize there's a tilt to the earth and there's a precession to the equinox, you'd have to constantly and steadily observe the universe and our solar system from Earth for about 2,000 years. I mean, where are those records? These are the records. That's the idea. Zachariah Sitchin, among other men, have deciphered and broke down this codex, and now we have a computer program that does it automatically. And they've all turned out really similar. And to add to this, we have Thoth that's given us information over the years through different forms, either through channeling, whether you believe that stuff or not, and through things like the Emerald Tablets. And there's a lot more text, and if there's any references I need to add, I'll add them as I go. Now, this story, it spans hundreds of thousands of years into our past. It talks about, Tiamat, Nephilim. It goes on and on. And then seeding the human race, Adam and Eve, the children of Lemuria, the Atlanteans. It's not really the most important part of the story, but I guess it's crucial to at least mention and go over. So I give mention to it, and if you guys have any questions, we can go over that in a future tape. But trying to keep this nice and brief and full of info. No, it's basically saying a long time ago, there's some point in human history where humans were a lot higher than we are now. We were almost psychic, and we were living at a higher consciousness, almost interdimensional, and communicated through telepathic means like thought, emotions, things like that. We didn't need the word for written words or things like that. That would be clumsy. And the humans at that time resided on a string of islands. They referred to those islands called Lemuria. They went through what was referred to as almost a consciousness shift. And the island sunk, which I'm guessing is something like a polar shift or something to do with the precession going through the galactic core, and just doing a polar shift, which would actually shift energies and conscious level of the beings too, not just the magnetic, the matter and everything that's trapped inside that magnetosphere. So during this pole shift and this consciousness rise, basically the land sunk, and there's, I imagine just like a pole shift, a physical pole shift and a magnetic pole shift. The water shifted and the tides changed, your lands and rises and sinks. Now there's evidence that basically the coral reef had something to play with this too. As these islands all grew, Atlantis rose up out of the ocean. So that's the point, the place that we call Atlantis and where they resided. And basically, they went through similar to what we're going through now, just a consciousness shift, and people started researching meditation and expanding their mind, and being scholars, this and that. They went from there, and that's that point in history. From there, then you got the scientific evidence to back that up as well, because the coral reef, we got the same coral reef and biosphere basically from Hawaii all the way to the Easter Island. And that coral reef, scientists realized the link because the biosphere, like I said, the animals and everything living there, there's an actual link. That's the only place in the world that you see that. And Thoth himself, through different sources, actually said that was basically off one of the shores of Atlantis, basically a string of islands that would run off of the original land formation. Now, as this transition happened, people in Atlantis rose, people just shifted all over. It's manifest destiny. They went all over the globe. They were lost. They didn't know where to go. And at this point, it says that there was about 1,000 individuals of a higher consciousness. And I believe they referred to them as the Nakals. These were almost like the Jedi, if you will, or Ascended Masters is what they're called today. And from what I understand is they basically went to Atlantis and prepared to project their energies in this big meditative circle basically in the formation of a Merkaba. And I'll go ahead and pull that up real quick to show you this. I'm having trouble with the screen share right now, so I'll try to add it in later or just give you a link at the bottom. But it's a Merkaba. It's basically a chakra system or tree of life system for the Earth. They aligned their energies and made this basically energy vortices and chakra system on the islands. They did this one with 12 vortexes or chakras, one with an extra at the top, one with an extra at the bottom. At the top, that was also called Poseidon. That was where Enki resided, and that was actually the island was named Poseidon. Supposedly, this thing was so accurate; it was accurate down to the atom, the atomic placement of it, and basically created over many miles an energy grid on the planet, a natural created by these higher consciousness beings. They also aligned it basically with the kundalini of the earth, the energy that goes, just like it goes up your spine when you're studying the kundalini, came up from the core of the earth to Atlantis, into this energy grid, feeding them. And supposedly that Merkaba actually moves the kundalini of the earth, if you will, kind of moves every 13,000 years. It moved from Atlantis, to eventually to the mountains in Tibet, and supposedly at the turn of the millennia, it's again here in a new place. At this point, they breathed life into it. They breathed energy into the energy grid, and from all over the world, all the normal people, the Lemurians, were called to fill these energy vortices. And at this point in history, the Lemurians were very right-brained, feminine, undeveloped, almost teenager society when it came to spirituality. They started working with their spiritual energies, their chakras, but they weren't completely perfected in that sense. And basically, as they're getting pulled towards these chakras, the nature of the person would come out, and you'd gravitate towards what chakra node on Atlantis that they wanted that they vibed with, they resonated with most. And since they had basically two undeveloped chakras, these are spiritual energies that they didn't work with on the whole tree of life, there's two void spaces, two places that were full of energy and were pulling in life, but nothing was there. So basically, it was like a vortex. It was a funnel pulling life in. So, as I understand it, the Hebrew people came. It was like the Earth was like a reincarnation for them. They graduated but they failed. They were so left-brained that they didn't get all the right-brain spiritual stuff, and were kind of sent back to this reincarnation to learn again. And they went to one of the chakra nodes, and it was good. It was good for the people because the left brain and right brain started blending. They started reaching a higher spiritual consciousness. And then supposedly the Martians, these very dominant right brain male energy entities, were at war, and they were doing basically a Luciferian project where they broke off from nature and started to do their own thing, and were destroying their planet. They did basically a Merkaba, if you will, on their planet and completely ripped it open, just destroyed it. It was a Luciferian project. I believe that was what actually destroyed Mars, and there's lots of evidence there. You can fly over that, the whole flyover of their trench and see the whole trench. Me and actually Dave Dobbs are doing a little show on that actually here. We recorded it the other day, and apparently the recording didn't work. But otherwise, anyways, these Martians, seeing that their planet was being doomed, and they knew that inevitably their destruction was upon them, they came in and basically bullied their way in or made deals, whatever it was. They came to this energy, and that's when things started getting mixed up. That's when the domination, the war type society took over. And for the evidence to back this, you can look in Mayan record and see there was 10 cities on Atlantis when the actual main body of Atlantis when it fell. And I think it was called the Tayanus document. And it's in the British Museum, something like that, somewhere along. But it's in Mayan record, and you can look it up. Yeah, so these two extraterrestrial races, according to Thoth, stepped in and tried to fill the chakra, and basically, not the Hebrews, but the Martians really threw it out of balance. When we look at the scientific data, that we see that the surface is magnetized, but there is no magnetic field around Mars. So that means there was a magnetic field, there was an atmosphere, there was water, there's the zircon. It's all there. They were a race at war. They destroyed their society. It was a Luciferian project where they tried to divide themselves from the unity of the universe and try to have a duality of the universe. Instead of if you look into that with the sacred geometry and the seed of life, there's actually two circles at the beginning of the Luciferian seed of life, and it's basically all throughout the universe's history. It's failed and ended in destruction. Now the Merkaba it's basically the tool of ascension. It's this energy field around your body. It's in the shape of a six-pointed star almost. And if you look it up, it's really interesting. But it's a natural thing. It's really cool. References to it all around the world. When you activate it basically to its fullest potential, you can change dimensions, travel through the universe, and all kinds of crazy things. It's the idea of awakening your chakras fully, and this is the end product. They built a synthetic Merkaba on Mars, and you see the proof on Mars if you do it with different maps and such, with the Sphinx and the pyramids, 5-point stars. If you really look into it, you can realize that they tried to get away. They built this thing that it wasn't stable. It blew their planet up, and the few ones that got away came here and just caused chaos. About 65,000 years ago, supposedly, to Thoth is when they came, and didn't ask permission and just bailed on. And that's per Thoth what happened. Changed our whole evolutionary path. The Nakals, basically, living on the island of Poseidon, was the brain of the chakra system of Atlantis. And it was made of 3 rings. The inner ring was for the Nakals, and it was supposed to be lined and paved with these blue stones. And the outer rings was for the Mayas, the priesthoods, the ones that came down. the next ring, basically. And then the third outer ring was, there's the black ring out there for the Atlanteans, basically, the way I understand it. I could be a little bit off on that, but you could look into the study a little bit further if you'd like. But basically, it was the symbol. It was the idea for the whole Atlantean process and the whole symbol, basically. So these few thousand Martians that came through this synthetic Merkaba, basically, they tried to declare war and invade us, basically. But we had millions outnumbering them, so stopped them from conquering us officially. Basically, they join us. So they were like, as I said, we were a very female, free-flowing, right-brained society at this time. We were almost like teenagers. These Martians were like old male, left-brain dominant war generals. Okay, so after they blended in and realized they couldn't dominate over us because of the numbers, they started bullying us and manipulating us, introducing their technologies and their ways of thinking, and it started activating that part of the brain for us. It started making us more left-brain dominant, if you will. It was basically what the settlers of North America did to the natives here. It's parallels that. Basically, bit by bit, piece by piece, the Martians, as you want to call them that, gained control of Atlantis, as the story goes. So basically, about 26,000 years ago, this all came to a change. So there was another polar shift. Now, to touch on this story, a man named Edward Casey, he was a channel and was always pulling these information out and pulled out this information from these higher dimensions that there's going to be a polar shift in the future. Scientists at the time, they just didn't know what to think of them. And it was basically the birth of the New Age movement. And the scientists, will say, went and looked up in the law of record and started noticing there's these clues that, wait, there is magnetic and physical pole shifts. And they see that present in the law of record. They found out that, one happened 13,000 years ago. It looks like they happen indefinitely around over 13,000 years, at least the magnetic pole shift. We found out that they did, in the matter of a day, every time, the poles would shift either 90 degrees or 180 degrees. Also, Nostradamus and the Mayans also predicted pole shift in the future. Now, animals like birds and whales, they use these magnetic lines to navigate. So when they get messed up, the birds are ending up in spaces they're not supposed to end up. The whales will beach themselves, and it's happening right now. Now, with these polar shifts, you got to understand, especially them being maybe 13,000 years now, they align with our consciousness shift as well. Thoth, he lived on Atlantis for a long time. He told us that he watched the Earth shift 5 times from Atlantis. So, 26,000 years ago, we were going through the same stage that we're going through right now. We got done the falling asleep stage, and we were waking up spiritually, physically, mentally, the whole night. And with this shift, a piece of land broke off of Atlantis and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, creating a lot of fear. And actually, the consciousness shift actually was shifted downwards because of this. Now, when they went down in consciousness level, basically, they lost their connection to the future. They didn't have the insight that they had anymore, such as seeing their homeland be destroyed, and it made them freak out. And you got to consider anything pre-flood was that the people lived a lot longer, 10 times as long as we did. The story of Adam and Eve in the Bible, you got the Sumerian tablets telling the same story. Basically, these people lived 900,000 years, 900 to 1,000 years. So a 30-year-old back then would be like a 300-year-old. It was exponential. And that's in both stories, so take that how you want. Right? Then this basically in between that shift and now a comet approached, and the Atlanteans living on many a higher level of consciousness than we are now, at least. So, many kind of cross dimensionality. They became aware of it before he came here, and they decided to debate what to do. Now, there was a big debate. The Martians wanted to blow it out of the sky, and they were a minority. Even though they were in control, they were still a minority. They wanted to blow it out of the sky. But the Nicals, the Nicals, the Jedi, if you will, these seers, they realized it was in divine order, and they wanted to let it take its course. This thing, they decided to just let it hit. The Martians gave in. They decided to let it come in. It landed, I believe, near South Carolina, off the shore there. And basically, right there, that's in between that, the southern shore of the Americas, and a big kind of triangle almost shape was the landmass. It was Atlantis, and at the very, very southern part, where the Bermuda Triangle is, that's actually a side effect of something I'll tell you later on in the story that's coming up. So scientists confirmed that it hit about 12,000 years ago, right off the shore of Charleston, South Carolina. According to the text, they said, and according to Thoth, that pieces of it actually hit the mainland of Atlantis. So basically, when that hit the mainland there, it hit where the Martians originally settled, and they were really mad. They decided to rebel and revolt against this society and completely control it, basically go to war with them and divorce them, if you will, and start building another Merkaba, false Merkaba, Luciferian project on the Earth. It was, the same idea. So when they made this thing, they thought they knew how to do it from Mars still. They made it, set it all up, basically turned it on, and boom, tore like a dimensional rift basically there where the Bermuda Triangle is now, where they settled originally, into the Tree of Life chakra that was open for them. And they caused a lot of turmoil in that way, since basically these were old earthbound souls with a lower dimension. They started attaching themselves to the bodies in this dimension, causing a lot of pain, if you will, and sorrow, confusion. Now, the Nicals, or the Jedi, the guides of Atlantis, they were special because they basically ascended to the point of immortality, as we would see it. They could keep their body young and fresh for as long as they decided, and pass on when they decided. When they reincarnated, they didn't go through the memory loss or all the pain that we did. It's not the same process. Now, there's some actually tantric meditations and things that you have to do apparently to transcend this, but it's not one just aspect. But this is apparently how Thoth has lived as long as he has. If you'd like to study more about Thoth, I'd look up Drew Vidal Melchizedek. Just go ahead and look him up. I won't say too much about that, but I'll let you go ahead and look it up. So the whole idea of this thing happening is when we create this Merkaba, it's like a 3 stars of David, if you will. And 2 are counter-rotating, 1 stationary. It makes this 3-dimensional, awesome object, and it goes out around us and protects us as like an energy field, if you will. But it also does this same sense. You do it, you create it inside with love, and all these, the aspect, of ascension. Now, when it's created artificially, it doesn't have that love. That's why it fails. Now, this artificial Merkaba they created, the peak of it sticks out of the water, and that's why planes and ships just disappear into this multi-dimensional rift down into a lower dimension. They didn't tear open a higher dimension; they tore open a lower dimension. So it still exists to this day, and hopefully, we can study more from that. So these Nicole did what they could. They gathered up these lower dimensional beings, sent them back, sewed up the dimensional tear the best they could. So what happened followed, it was just a complete collapse, Armageddon. Basically, people were sick, just everything. Everything was attained to a survival state. And these Nicole beings, they didn't know what to do, so they started asking, reaching up to the higher dimensional beings, like these 11th and 12th dimensional beings that we can't even comprehend right now. So it's almost useless to talk about. And they basically told the Nicoles that we as a race was just, we were going to hit rock bottom, start all over. We went through polarity shifts, so we're no longer this female energy presence anymore. We were a male-dominated left-brain society. So we went through that whole shift, and then we were going to have to relearn everything over the course of 13,000 years, which has never been done before. So Thoth and these beings, they created this plan to make this human consciousness grid. This is called Christ consciousness. When you attain that, it's usually attained over hundreds of thousands of years, and that we're expected to do it in 13,000. So Thoth got Ra and Aragot, and they got together and they started this procedure. So what their plan to do is kind of make this human consciousness grid around the Earth that contained all their consciousness, and basically we could access it like the internet. So basically Thoth, Ra, and Aragot built this Christ consciousness grid so we could elevate our consciousness back to Christ consciousness over this 13,000 period. So they went to Chem, which is now Egypt, and was a rainforest back then. So Thoth built the pyramids 200 years before the previous pole shift. The weird thing about the pyramids is, like, when we look at them scientifically, it looks like the top stones were placed first from the top down. But it would explain it if we understand it, that they created it fourth dimensionally and started to manifest it third dimensionally. Now, Thoth has told people this in person and wrote it down on the end of the tab. Supposedly, we can read them at almost 100 different levels of consciousness and get new meaning out of them every time. So I'd want people to pick up Gerald Clark's book and read that and read his translation, because it'll give you new understanding to it every time you read it. I promise you that. Anytime you learn something, you can go back, read that, and you just get new meaning. He's also given us the flower of life, multiple other things that you consider the amount of information from it. You have to consider the source as being at least true in some sense. It has to. Now, according to them, what's deep under the pyramids is this Hall of Records, Hall of Mente, and that's where this capstone resides. It was not built by Thoth. It was way predates the Atlanteans. The capstone is supposed to be 5.5 inches tall, and is a holographic image of the Great Pyramid. It has all the rooms, the whole nine. Now, if what Thoth says is true, that leaves a 24-foot missing piece. But a missing piece is a spaceship, starship that's accessible through the Sphinx. And the Sphinx, according to Thoth, is about 5.5 million years old. Now, below the Sphinx, about a mile down, there was this round room. It was this huge disc-shaped object, supposed to be the oldest synthetic object on Earth. It's round like a disc, and it's flat like a frisbee. It has a pattern on top of it, and the pattern is about 5 atoms thick, and it communicates with your living organism. It's basically energetically powered. It becomes an extension of you, if you will, and it's connected with the spirit of the earth and the whole thing. It's basically to be a guardian of the earth, if you will. And when it connects to the pyramid, it makes the phi ratio, basically. And when that phi ratio occurs, that life occurs, And basically, the ship's supposed to be able to use and access the purest of souls. You got to remember, when these bad things happen, people usually go for power plays. So it's nice to have some kind of defense system. I guess that's what they'll think. Supposedly, if something were to happen, somebody pure of heart would find this thing, go to it, be drawn to it. This thing would basically dimensionally be lifted up and come between the earth and the sun, and whatever that person's thoughts at the time would basically become manifest, if you will. It would be a way to protect the earth, because the fail-safes. So basically, as time went on, we went through this shift, and as we went through the shift, basically we were supposed to be plummeted into this great void of nothingness. It was supposed to be 3.5 days of absolute blackness, and this is actually described in many religions and societies, ancient texts, all of them. Emerald tablets say that when we go through this shift, that we go through a void space, basically, as our frequencies change, and there's basically darkness and blackness for 3.5 days. So it's supposed to be depicted in the Trelawney document as well. I believe science would refer to it as the electromagnetic null zone, I believe. So as our Merkabas weren't fully developed to have that protection as we were going through the void, we just had our memories erased. It's like having the best computer in the world and deleting everything from it, even the software. At this point, basically, we stopped being able to breathe vital energy into our bodies from the sun and the environment into our chakras. And we went from living thousands of years to just hundreds of years. So basically, all the Nakals got on the ship, and they went up, and it was protected by the Merkaba. They retained their memory. We lost those. So Thoth gathered a third of his people and went to the island of the sun. The other two took the other remaining 2/3, went to Tibet and Egypt, and started to rule there. So they let life progress for about 6,500 years naturally. And as society progressed, they were the hidden hand that helped us. They gave us the hydraulics, the writing, teachings, the laws. Every so often they'd come when they noticed that we could handle another piece of information. They'd come along, hand us the information, we'd use it and move on. And this is why it explains the hidden hand throughout society. Thoth tells us this. So Thoth's son Tat formed the Tat Brotherhood, and it's still supposedly guarding this forbidden knowledge, or not forbidden knowledge, but sacred knowledge today. And I hope that clears up anything, and just let you guys know. Let me know what you think of it, and we're gonna go. This is obviously just one segment. We can break other pieces down into future segments, but I want to keep it, short, sweet, full of info, and we can go from questions from there and do further parts breakdown, secret societies, this and that, anything you guys want. So go ahead and give me some requests, give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody.